I was 16 when I learned that my therapy fund was a lie. For years, my parents promised me that every allowance, every gift check from my grandparents, even the money I earned mowing lawns was being tucked away in a special account. It was supposed to cover the therapy I desperately needed after the panic attacks started swallowing my nights. Instead, one Saturday morning, I found out where it had really gone: a $2,400 designer dress for my sister's prom. My parents said it was an investment in her future and that I could wait for therapy. That was the day I understood that in their eyes, my mental health was negotiable, her image wasn't. They took what was mine to patch up her vanity. I swore then that I'd never forgive them, and that one day, I'd take back more than they ever stole from me. My name is Daniel Hayes. I'm 24 now, but the day this story really began I was 16, a junior in high school, and already living with panic attacks that chewed holes through my nights. I'd lie awake at 2 in the morning, heart racing, palms sweating, convinced I couldn't breathe. Therapy was supposed to be the one thing keeping me tethered. My parents told me not to worry, that the therapy fund we'd been building since I was 12 would take care of it. The fund wasn't some abstract promise. I'd seen my dad deposit birthday checks from grandma. I watched my mom pull cash out of my sweaty fist after I'd mowed lawns in the neighborhood and tell me, straight into the therapy account. "You'll thank us later." They said every dollar I earned or was given was going into that account, safe for the day I finally needed real help. That Saturday morning in May, I was standing in the kitchen when the truth slipped. My mom was holding up a garment bag, her face glowing like she'd just been crowned queen. Inside was a pale blue designer gown, sequins catching the morning light through the blinds. I didn't even know dresses could cost thousands, but I found out fast, because my dad bragged. $2,400, he said proudly, sipping coffee. Worth every penny. She's going to be the star of prom. I blinked, thinking maybe he'd misspoken. Wait, how? Where did you get that kind of money? They exchanged a quick glance, the kind that tells you the decision was made long before you were let in on it. My mom's voice was light, almost dismissive. "From the fund, honey. Don't worry. You'll be fine. Therapy can wait. But this? This is once in a lifetime for your sister." The words didn't even land at first. I laughed, a short, broken sound, because I thought it had to be a joke. But my sister came down the stairs at that exact moment, twirling in excitement. She clutched the dress like it was some holy relic, barely registering me at all. I asked again, sharper this time, my throat tight, "You mean the therapy fund? My therapy fund?" Dad set down his mug with a sigh, already annoyed. "Daniel, it's not the end of the world. You're strong. You can wait. Your sister only gets one prom night." That was the moment. Right there. When I realized that, to them, my panic attacks and sleepless nights were negotiable, but her prom image wasn't. They had robbed me with a smile, convinced they were doing something noble. I said nothing more. Not that morning, not that night. I just went quiet, because I knew arguing wouldn't change a thing. But inside, something locked into place, hard, cold, unmovable. I would never forgive them for it, and one day, when the time was right, I'd take back far more than they ever stole. If you asked anyone in our town back then who the Hayes family's star was, the answer would have come without hesitation: my sister, Chloe. She was the golden child, the one who never seemed to touch the ground. Every teacher adored her, every neighbor smiled when they saw her. My parents spoke about her like she was destined for some greater stage, like the world was just her runway and the rest of us were lucky to stand on the sidelines. And me? I was the afterthought. The quiet one, the responsible one. The one they told people didn't need much. It was a clever disguise for neglect. I learned to track the imbalance in dollars and cents. Chloe got violin lessons at $60 an hour, I got handed library cards and told to self-study. She got a brand new iPhone the week it dropped, I got my dad's cracked hand-me-down with a sticky volume button. Even at dinner, portions favored her. My dad would spoon out an extra serving on her plate and grin like it was an inside joke. They told me over and over again that she was special. That her looks, her charm, her presence, all of it, were investments in her future. Mine, apparently, was a future of endurance. I started noticing the smaller betrayals. My mom would comb through my room under the excuse of tidying up, but really, she was hunting for hidden cash. Birthday money from relatives never stayed hidden long. Once I stashed $40 under a loose floorboard, she found it within the week. "Straight into savings," she said with a bright smile, as if stealing my last shred of control was some noble act. It would have broken me if I hadn't learned to turn my focus elsewhere. Numbers made sense in a way people never did. Equations didn't lie. Budgets didn't play favorites. So, I buried myself in what I could control: tracking money, watching how debt worked, studying the way credit reports ticked upward and downward with every decision. When panic clawed at my chest, I'd sit with spreadsheets. I listed every expense I could see my parents making, their mortgage payments, credit card balances I caught glimpses of in the mail, late fees, utility bills. Chloe got Chanel makeup and weekend shopping trips. My parents got debt. And me? I got information. By 16, I knew the shape of my parents' financial life better than they did. I could see the cracks forming, spreading. They thought they were building Chloe's future. What I saw was a house of cards leaning toward collapse. And I decided then, if they were going to treat me like I was invisible, then fine, I'd make myself invisible. But I'd also make myself ready. When the collapse came, I would be there, silent and waiting. By the time most kids my age were fumbling through driver's ed, I was learning amortization schedules. While Chloe was busy perfecting her eyeliner in the bathroom mirror, I was buried in library books about real estate law and personal finance. It started small. I'd grab the Wall Street Journal from the school library, circle terms I didn't understand, and look them up online. Escrow. Lien. Fixed rate versus adjustable. At first it was like staring into another language, but slowly, patterns emerged. Debt had a rhythm, and so did the downfall that followed when people ignored it. My parents thought I was just good with numbers, a harmless quirk they could laugh about at dinner. But I wasn't just crunching figures. I was building a private ledger of their lives. Every time a credit card statement showed up in the mailbox, I memorized the numbers before Mom swept them away. Minimum payments climbing. Interest rates inching up. I wrote them down in a spiral notebook I kept under my mattress. Dad's Visa, $7,200 balance, 18.9% April. Mom's MasterCard, $4,650, already delinquent once. Mortgage, $1,740 due on the 15th of every month, with a fixed rate they could barely sustain. They were bleeding money faster than they admitted, and Chloe's expenses were gasoline on the fire. $200 hair appointments. A violin upgrade that cost more than my first used car eventually would. My parents told her yes every time, like a reflex, no matter the bill. I never confronted them. I didn't have to. Instead, I started testing myself. If Dad makes $3,800 take home a month, and Mom brings in $1,200 from substitute teaching, how many months before the debt overtakes them if Chloe keeps burning through $600 a month in extras? I had the answer by junior year, less than 3. So while they celebrated Chloe's every move, I worked my own quiet hustle. I got a part-time job at a hardware store. I opened a secured credit card with a $300 limit, paid it off religiously, and watched my score inch upward. I read forums late at night where people discussed how to legally buy properties out of foreclosure auctions. Some threads were trash, others were gold. Numbers became my revenge. They were neutral, incorruptible, immune to favoritism. And they gave me something my parents never thought to offer me: power. By senior year, I knew more about FICO algorithms and debt-to-income ratios than most adults twice my age. My classmates joked about college apps. I was running silent simulations on how quickly a drowning family could lose a home if they missed just 3 mortgage payments. I didn't know exactly when the collapse would come. But I knew it would. Numbers don't lie, and my parents were already living in red ink, and when the fall arrived, I wouldn't just watch. I'd be ready to take everything they'd ever denied me. It was the summer before my senior year when the first real sign of collapse slid quietly into the mailbox. A plain white envelope, no logo, just a return address from Midstate Lending Services. My mom left it on the kitchen counter while she rushed out the door with Chloe for yet another boutique fitting. I slid it open while the house was empty. Inside was a notice of late payment. Their June mortgage hadn't cleared. The letter was blunt, clinical: pay within 30 days or risk default. My stomach tightened, not with fear, but with recognition. I had run the math enough times to know this moment was inevitable. They'd been skating by on minimum payments, robbing Peter to pay Paul, and now the mortgage was slipping too. I slid the letter back into the envelope, careful to crease it exactly as I'd found it. That night at dinner, Mom never mentioned it. Dad talked about Chloe's upcoming recital like the roof wasn't about to slide out from under us. I kept my mouth shut, nodding, filing away every word. But I started watching more closely. I noticed the stack of unopened mail growing in the hallway basket. I caught Dad taking late-night calls, his voice low, muttering about extensions and restructuring. Mom pawned an old bracelet, though she told Chloe it was out of style. Meanwhile, Chloe's life carried on untouched. A new $600 violin bow. A $90 salon appointment the week after that. They were shoving sandbags against a flood while opening windows for more water. The cracks weren't just financial, they were emotional. I overheard them fighting at night, voices sharp through the drywall. Mom accused Dad of lying about his overtime hours. Dad snapped back about her bleeding money for Chloe's whims. The same parents who once moved in perfect lockstep for her were now fraying at the edges. And me? I became the ghost in my own house. Quiet, unbothered, invisible. I made sure no one noticed the extra time I spent at the library computer, combing county foreclosure records. I learned which houses in our town were already flagged as pre-foreclosure. The Hayes residence wasn't listed yet, but I knew it was coming. The cracks were spreading fast, and my parents couldn't see it. But I could. I could see the whole foundation shifting, ready to give way. And when it did, I'd be waiting on the other side of the rubble, with the one thing they thought I'd never have: leverage. I knew one truth better than any other by then: revenge isn't something you rush. It's like investing, you don't cash out at the first hint of profit. You wait. You let it grow. You bide your time until the yield is undeniable. While my parents fought over dwindling dollars and Chloe paraded in her glittering dresses, I was building something quieter, stronger. My own foundation. First, credit. That tiny secured card I'd opened at 17, by the time I turned 18, it had blossomed into a real line of credit. I kept my utilization under 10%, paid it down every month, and watched my score climb past 700. My parents didn't notice. They were too busy co-signing loans for Chloe's future. Second, savings. Every paycheck from the hardware store, every side gig fixing neighbors' lawnmowers or babysitting their Wi-Fi routers, I funneled into an online savings account my parents didn't know existed. It wasn't much at first, $50 here, $100 there, but compounding works in silence. By the time I graduated, I had just under $9,000 tucked away. Not flashy. Not life-changing. But a seed. Third, knowledge. I made foreclosure law my late-night obsession. I learned the difference between a sheriff's sale and a trustee's auction. I studied how liens attached to property, how bidders could sweep in and claim ownership if the original mortgage holder defaulted. Most kids were cramming for SATs, I was memorizing case studies on strategic defaults and short sales. And last, invisibility. I played my role perfectly, the quiet, dutiful son who didn't need much, who wasn't a problem. I nodded when they scolded me for not being outgoing like Chloe. I smiled when they mocked me for wasting time with numbers. I gave them nothing, no suspicion, no reason to look deeper. Patience became my armor. Every time I heard Chloe whine about needing another $300 for prom accessories, I forced myself to breathe, to let the anger settle into focus. Every time Dad snapped at me for being ungrateful when I didn't congratulate Chloe loudly enough, I folded the bitterness into silence. Because I knew what they didn't, the clock was ticking. Their house wasn't theirs forever. And when the bank came knocking, I'd be standing there with cash in hand, the patient son they had overlooked, ready to buy the ground out from under them. The long game wasn't about revenge for a dress anymore. It was about showing them, on paper, in ink, with a deed stamped by the county clerk, that they had gambled away my future, and I had quietly taken theirs. And they would never see it coming. It didn't happen all at once. Collapses rarely do. They creep in, fracture by fracture, until the whole structure gives way. The first sign came in a stack of envelopes my mom shoved into a drawer without opening. I waited until the house was empty, then pulled them out. 3 separate credit cards, all stamped past due in red. Minimums missed. Late fees piled on. Interest rates jacked up to penalty levels, 24.99%. I logged every number into my private ledger. Then came the car. Dad's truck was repossessed one Tuesday morning while I was homesick from school. A tow truck rumbled into the driveway at 9:14 a.m. sharp, chains clanking, hydraulic arms gripping the wheels. The driver didn't even knock. By the time my parents got home, there was an oil stain where the truck used to be. Dad told Chloe it was in the shop. I knew better. But the real avalanche was the mortgage. They missed one payment, then 2. By the 3rd, the bank moved fast. A thick envelope arrived, notice of foreclosure proceedings. I read it cover to cover at the kitchen table while my parents screamed at each other upstairs. The debt had reached $14,800 in arrears. The property was officially in pre-foreclosure, with an auction date penciled in for 90 days. I should have felt fear. After all, it was my home too. But I didn't. I felt a cold clarity, the kind I used to pray for during panic attacks. The numbers I'd tracked for years were no longer projections, they were reality. Everything was unfolding exactly as I'd predicted. Chloe, of course, was oblivious. She came home with shopping bags from a boutique downtown the same day the notice arrived. $450 shoes. She called them an investment piece. I watched Mom hand over cash for them like it wasn't the same cash that should have gone toward the mortgage. At night, I'd sit in my room with the foreclosure letter spread out under my desk lamp. I highlighted dates, payment schedules, auction terms. I double-checked my savings account balance, $11,300 now, thanks to overtime at the hardware store and side hustles. Not enough yet, but close. The house wasn't falling. It had already fallen. My parents just hadn't admitted it to themselves. And I wasn't planning to save them. I was planning to take what they thought could never be taken. The auction notice was printed in the county newspaper, small, buried between used car ads and estate sales. Property of James and Elaine Hayes, 214 Willowbrook Drive, to be sold at public auction, courthouse steps, 10 a.m., September 14th. That was my house. My parents' house. And soon, it would be mine. The weeks leading up to the sale, I moved like a ghost. I worked double shifts, picked up handyman jobs, even sold my old laptop to scrape together every last dollar. My savings balance climbed, $12,480. $13,720. $14,005. I didn't need to outbid wealthy investors, I just needed to be ready when no one else cared enough to fight for a tired, 3-bedroom suburban house with peeling paint and a roof that needed replacing. On the morning of the auction, I woke before dawn. I put on a plain gray hoodie, baseball cap pulled low. No one there would know me as Daniel Hayes, the forgotten son of the family about to be thrown out. I was just another bidder with cash in hand. The courthouse steps smelled of wet leaves and old stone. A dozen people milled around, seasoned investors, mostly, flipping through clipboards. The auctioneer, a man in a wrinkled suit, shuffled papers with the detachment of someone selling a car part, not a home full of memories. When the Hayes property came up, the bidding started at $120,000. Too high for me at first, but silence followed. The investors didn't want it. Too small. Not enough profit margin. Opening bid, $120,000, the auctioneer repeated, scanning the crowd. No hands. He dropped it, $110,000? $100,000? Still nothing. Finally, his voice hit, $90,000. I raised my hand. Heart steady, not racing. Just math. The auctioneer nodded. We have 90. Do I hear 95? A man in a leather jacket scratched his chin, then shook his head. No one else moved. Going once. Going twice. His gavel smacked wood. Sold. 90,000 to bidder 17. The deed would transfer after payment cleared. My payment. I signed the papers in a side office that smelled of dust and toner. The clerk, an older woman with tired eyes, slid the ownership transfer forms toward me. Congratulations, she muttered, stamping them. It's yours. The keys would come later. But the house, the one my parents thought was theirs forever, was already mine on paper. Walking out into the September sunlight, deed folder tucked under my arm, I didn't feel triumph. Not yet. What I felt was inevitability. The game I'd been playing for years had just crossed its final threshold. And my parents still didn't know I was the one who had just bought the ground out from under them. 2 weeks after the auction, a plain envelope arrived in my P.O. box, the one my parents didn't know existed. Inside was the official deed transfer, embossed with the county seal, and a small manila pouch. Inside the pouch, 2 tarnished brass house keys labeled 214 Willowbrook. I sat in my car staring at them for a long time. My parents' house. My childhood bedroom. The kitchen where my mom once told me therapy could wait. The keys to all of it now sat in my palm, cold and real. That night, I drove past the house. The living room light glowed, Chloe's laughter spilled out through an open window. My parents were still living like nothing had changed, still pretending the storm hadn't already torn through. They didn't know the roof over their heads no longer belonged to them. I parked a block away and walked the sidewalk, the keys in my pocket, heavy as a weapon. I didn't use them, not yet. Timing mattered. Too soon, and it would just be drama. Too late, and they'd have excuses. Instead, I started preparing for the reveal. I made copies of every document, the auction receipt, the deed transfer, the stamped county records. I organized them into a neat binder, labeled tabs, foreclosure notice, auction bid, deed transfer. No one would be able to argue with it. No one could say it was fake. Meanwhile, my parents grew more frantic. The bank's eviction notice finally landed, taped to the front door in bold print. I watched from across the street as Mom tore it down, shaking, while Dad swore under his breath. Chloe wailed about losing her room, as if the house was hers by divine right. I stayed silent. Calm. Invisible. Then, one late afternoon, I slipped into the house while they were gone. I used the new key, walked straight in. The place smelled the same, laundry detergent and dust. But it felt different now. Mine. I went room to room, slow, deliberate, touching the walls, the door frames, my old desk. In my parents' bedroom, I opened the drawer where Mom used to hide envelopes of my confiscated birthday money. Empty now. I smiled, just barely, and locked the drawer behind me. When I left, I locked the door with my key. That was the moment it became real, not just on paper, but in my hands. The house was no longer their fortress. It was my weapon. And soon, I'd show them. The day I chose wasn't random. It was the morning the sheriff's deputies showed up with the final eviction notice. The knock rattled the door at 8:02 a.m. sharp. I watched from across the street as Dad opened it, face pale, shoulders sagging under the weight of inevitability. The deputy handed him the papers, firm and polite, then left without ceremony. Chloe's scream echoed through the neighborhood when she realized it was real. Mom clutched the papers, trembling, muttering, "This can't be happening. This can't be happening." I crossed the street with my binder tucked under my arm. Calm. Controlled. Every step measured. Dad spotted me first. "Daniel," he barked, raw panic bleeding into his voice. "Stay inside, this is family business." I stopped at the foot of the porch. "It is family business," I said evenly. "That's why I'm here." I opened the binder, flipped to the tab marked deed transfer, and handed it to him. He squinted at the paper, reading slow. Then his eyes widened. "No." His voice cracked. He flipped pages, hands shaking, eyes darting between county seals and stamped signatures. Mom leaned over his shoulder, mouth falling open. "This isn't funny," she hissed. "Where did you get these?" I pulled the keys from my pocket. Held them up. Let the brass glint in the sunlight. "From the county office. They gave them to me when I bought the house." Chloe stepped forward, mascara streaking down her cheeks. You bought it? You bought our house?" "No," I corrected. "I bought my house. The bank took it from you. I just happened to be the one standing there with cash when it went on the block." Dad's face turned crimson. "You little snake, how could you do this to your own family?" "Family?" I let the word hang. Family doesn't steal a therapy fund to buy a prom dress. Family doesn't tell their kid his panic attacks can wait while they drown themselves in debt for violin bows and designer shoes. You made your choices. I made mine. Silence stretched. Mom covered her mouth. Chloe sobbed. Dad tried to speak but no words came. I closed the binder. Slipped the keys back into my pocket. "You'll get official paperwork in the mail," I said. "From now on, if you want to stay here, you'll need to sign a lease." Their faces froze, equal parts disbelief and fury. But there was nothing left to argue. The paper trail was airtight. The deed was real. The house was mine. For the first time in my life, they were the ones powerless. And I was the one holding the roof over their heads. The reveal cracked something in my family that could never be repaired. In the days that followed, the house was filled not with silence but with blame. Chloe turned on my parents first. She stormed into the kitchen, voice shrill, accusing them of ruining her future by letting the mortgage spiral. "I could have been somebody if you hadn't screwed this up. Now what am I supposed to tell my friends? That we're renting our own house?" My mom tried to soothe her, promising it was only temporary, but her voice wavered. She knew it wasn't temporary. She knew the ink on that deed was permanent. Dad lashed out at Mom. "You kept spending on her. You drained us dry with dresses and salons and violin crap. Don't look at me like I'm the problem, you pushed this whole family into the ground." She snapped back, "You could have said no. You're the one who lied about overtime, who maxed out cards behind my back." The fights grew louder, sharper. I heard them through the walls, through the thin veneer of plaster and paint. And then there was me, calm, collected, sitting at the dining room table with my binder open whenever they tried to corner me. Every accusation they hurled my way, I answered with paper. "Here's the foreclosure notice. Slide. Here's the auction record. Slide. Here's the deed transfer with my name, not yours. Slide." They had no defense. The truth was printed in black ink, notarized, stamped. At night, Chloe cornered me in the hallway, eyes red and furious. "You think this makes you powerful? You think anyone's going to respect you for what you did? You're pathetic. I looked at her the way you'd look at someone screaming at the tide. Calm. Detached. No, Chloe. What's pathetic is begging your landlord for mercy when your landlord is your brother. Her mouth opened, then closed. She turned away. The first rent check was the breaking point. I handed them the lease, fair market rent, nothing outrageous. Dad's hands shook as he signed. Mom cried quietly, mascara bleeding into her shirt. Chloe refused to look at me at all. They had stolen from me when I was too young to fight back. Now every month, they'd have to hand me a check just to keep sleeping under the roof they thought was theirs forever. It wasn't revenge delivered in anger. It was justice in slow, meticulous payments. And with every signed lease, every cashed check, the balance of power shifted further. The consequences weren't just financial. They were psychological. They were permanent. The first rent check they wrote me didn't feel like triumph. It felt like a ledger closing, a debt finally marked paid. I deposited it into the same account that had once been meant for my therapy fund. The irony wasn't lost on me. Only now, it was enough. I booked my first real therapy session a week later. Paid in full, no hesitation, no guilt. For once, the money was mine to spend on what I needed, not what they decided was important. Living with them as tenants was strange at first. They walked the halls softer now, as if every creak in the floorboards reminded them it wasn't really their home anymore. My dad avoided eye contact. My mom fussed in silence, cleaning corners that didn't need cleaning. Chloe barely spoke to me at all. When she passed me in the hall, her perfume trailed behind her like smoke from a dying flame. But I didn't gloat. I didn't shove the keys in their faces or throw their past words back at them. Revenge had already been served, and louder victories would only cheapen it. Instead, I focused on building my own life. I finished school. I kept saving. I kept learning. Every month their rent paid down a mortgage that no longer belonged to them, but to me. Over time, the house stopped feeling like theirs. It stopped feeling like theirs stolen by me. It simply became mine. A quiet place where I rebuilt, piece by piece. And the truth is, I didn't need to scream or celebrate. They already lived every day with the knowledge that they'd once had everything, and through arrogance, favoritism, and neglect, they had lost it. To the son they thought could wait. One night, long after midnight, I walked the hallways alone. The air smelled of lemon cleaner and dust. My parents' door was shut, Chloe's room dark. I stopped outside my old bedroom, the same space where I'd once lain awake, choking on panic attacks. Now, it was silent. Steady. I touched the key ring in my pocket, the cool brass pressing against my palm. I whispered to no one. This time, it's mine. And that was enough.